Thank you, Clarice. What I appreciate is that as the panel, we are aware of the West's games. The West plays a lot of games, and it is essential for us to be aware when they are playing games, specifically with what we are currently seeing in Ukraine and in Russia, where they're saying we need a peace deal, we need things to settle down, we need things to become a lot better than what we are currently seeing. Lives need to be saved and etc. However, as one of the panelists emphasized, the fact that Europe is still sending its people into Ukraine so that they can fight for Ukraine, it shows you that the idea is not necessarily to have peace between Ukraine and Russia. The aim is to make sure that the what resulted in the war, the ideas that resulted in the war, become fulfilled. That is very key to understand, because if we think about it, why this war started in the first place, it was so basic. It wasn't something that was complex. We started initially with NATO doing a regime change in the UK, and Russia in itself, it needs to self-preserve. And the only way that it was able to do self-preservation at that point in time was that it needed to make sure that its borders are protected. And because they already had a contract with Ukraine and other members of the Soviet Union, that you will not join NATO anytime soon, because we need to make sure that there is some kind of isolation between us and them. They cannot place their weaponry in your country, because now we become targets. We are easily accessible. If they want to attack us, it will be easy to do that. So it becomes very difficult for us to enable or to allow them to do that. However, the West still went and it did regime change in the UK, where someone who was Russia friendly, where someone who was East friendly was now taken out for someone who was West friendly. And that on its own is very problematic. And no country in the world would allow that. It is very problematic. You cannot allow that. So if you understand that history, then you understand why we are seeing what we are seeing now, where the West still continues to provide men to go and fight this war, even though they've not officially declared war on Russia, but they are still providing weaponry, they are providing money, they're providing funds, they are providing human resources, even though they've not officially said that we are a part of this war. But we know, and I do appreciate the fact that President Putin has been smart enough to see these games that they attempt to play. And that is why we find ourselves in a position where Donald Trump thinks that he's been able to have some kind of peace deal in place. But because Putin does understand what is happening in the background, he has done excellently well in him being able to say, no, 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 no. Instead of me just taking what is given to me on the slide paper, I'm going to still protect myself, and I'm going to do all that matters for me to make sure that I still find myself in a position of power. Because as much as in an ideal world, we would have seen this war over in a very long time. But because of the resources that NATO and the rest of the West have been providing to Ukraine, we are still seeing people's lives ending endlessly. And there is no need for that. There is no need for that. If I give you a practical example, if right now, what countries that the West deem as enemies, specifically China, specifically Russia, if they were to say that they're going to register a country, they have a body, and they register a country that is a neighbor, maybe Mexico to the US, Cuba, like we saw with the Cuban missile crisis, or we say maybe somewhere in Europe, and they position themselves there, they have them under their wing, and then all of a sudden these people are able to position military bases next to these countries. They would not let it go. I can promise you the United States will not allow that to happen. However, they think that it is okay because they see themselves as this extraordinary power that has narratives that have strength to control the rest of the world, because they cannot be controlled by anyone else. However, they expect to control everyone else. They expect to control how other countries see their what is this their independence, how countries are able to control the what how the rest of the world sees them. For them, that makes them uncomfortable. So that is really frustrating, because we can still see until this day the very games that were played before this war in Ukraine are the same games that keep reproducing themselves during the process of this war that we're currently seeing in Ukraine. And one position that I've always held is that I hold a position of as little bloodshed as possible, because these are people's lives that we are seeing being lost. But there are these countries that are from the West that decide that the people's lives are not as valuable as their own, so they continue playing these games with people's, and that is really frustrating, Clarice. I do hope that I spoke to the point. Thank you.